Hi, welcome to the Velvet Door. And this is our Thursday night discussions that we like to call the Velvet Pill as we trickle down to the rabbit hole and we go into other informations and different understandings that we know that the average person, the average family, friend, sister, brother, lover, does not or may not be privy to understand maybe a more esoteric cult understanding, or maybe just another way of viewing our reality. We also like to dive deeper into our ancient history. A lot of the times we find that ancient history leads us into, we would say, a different dimension, a different realm, a different understanding, right? So I do have a guest tonight with me. This is Tokai. Did I pronounce that right, Tokai?
On point.
Oh, right. Okay, cool. So yes, Tokai is my guest tonight, and we're going to be building on some write-ups that have been submitted by him through his research on different planets, possibilities of other life out there. Also, um, we also tapped into other religion systems and how ancient religion systems might actually be shaping our reality today as we know it. And we're not just talking about Christianity. So, with no further ado, Tokai, I'm going to get you to just briefly introduce yourself. Let us know what you do and what inspires you to research everything that you research.
First thing. Thank you for having me. It's always a warm, welcoming space. But yeah, to definitely get right into it. I'm definitely. I've always had a curious mind. I've always loved reading. My father always pushed me to read, and funny enough, that's the first time I heard about Mithras. And far as these pre-Christian religions, um, my dad had sat me down and had me actually read an article that Martin Luther King Jr. had wrote during one of his tenures at one of his educational facilities. But basically, back then, not really understanding what I was reading, and years later, really being able to soak things in with attain knowledge through the years. It's all coming together. Currently, I work within the medical field. Definitely looking to expand, delving into other fields as well. IT being one of them. I am a I definitely say free time. Definitely a world traveler. Um, and emphasis on amateur iPhone photographer, and yeah, and definitely somewhat of a part time gamer. That's definitely a really huge aspect of my personality at this point.
Nice.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Nice, nice. So, as I said, me and Tokai, we've had plenty of builds. I'd say maybe like almost over a year. We've been building, whether it's directly or indirectly, with each other. And where we are now, I have to say, like he's always uncovering different aspects of history that I'm like, wow. When you think you know it all, like here comes Tokai with like some new drop, and you're like, oh snap. Ah, now I gotta add that into my research list. So it's definitely a pleasure to always have a brilliant brother like this around who he's very silent but he's deadly with his information, and it really makes you like stop, think, and wonder like, wow, like, wait a minute, like how I didn't find that, you found that, like where are you looking, what are you researching? So I want to get into something that for me this is very interesting, right? And The article is actually up on our Velvet Door website. So it's the-velvet-door.com. And this is an article about planet Titan, or a moon named Titan. I'm going to read the first paragraph. And then from there, Tokai, I want you to take it away and kind of break down the significance of this. And I see that Saturn is connected to this. So I think this is very interesting. And we'll get into that occult, esoteric, maybe type of thing. All right. So let me go ahead and read this. It says, space exploration has always been an exciting prospect for those of us who are brave enough to venture out into the unknown. What could be more exciting than exploring into the vastness we call space and time? According to the recent estimates, astronomers have placed the number of stars in the sky at 300 billion currently. That number could soon grow with the technological advancements necessary. Now, what could be more exciting than space exploration itself? Maybe the discovery of another world like Earth, which contains water. According to scientists, this world is called Titan, the largest moon, Saturn. Okay, break that down. And what inspired you to write about this? And I want you to break down, why is this such a phenomenon right now?
Mm, mm, mm. Uh, gladly for sure. Um, it's heavy. It's heavy for sure. Because when we do look into um, you know, Titan, and we're looking at a celestial body who is finding one of you know the more similar traits far as Earth's composition, far as these different compositional minerals, and talking about these compounds, H2O. You even have a presence of an atmosphere itself, within Titan. And when you really get down to it all, that presence of water, that's definitely key. Especially when looking at the you know a lot of the origins of many forms of life, for us on Earth, and its connection to water. It's it's definitely key, because I believe the temperature on Titan is like um -43 Celsius, I believe. um so therefore it's very cold. And so of course, the fact that it is further away from the sun, you know that's definitely going to facilitate a whole different environment. Even down to the length of one day. I believe one day on Titan is about 8 days on Earth. So, thinking about, all of these different, segments and aspects of, just this topic of Titan, it is very exciting, to think of, the possibility of, you know, a sign of something, being on outside of this sphere, that some would say is Earth. And yeah, it's definitely key. It's definitely key. Even when you are looking into the fact that they've named it Titan, that's that's telling in itself.
Why do you why do you think it needed Titan?
Yeah. And so yeah, digging down into Titan, seeing that this is a celestial sphere, which could possibly be facilitating life, you know, um, possibly, of course, with conjecture added. However, that's most likely the case, being that when you do look at Earth and you see that water is one of the key components to composing, to the composition of, the facilitation of life itself. So many interesting aspects. And then when you do look at, the fact that Titan, the largest moon of, Saturn, is named Titan, that holds a lot of weight. Um, I'd say for a fact, in my opinion. And like you said earlier, we've been building for some time now. Time flies by when
Mm.
your nose is in a book, man. Look,
Yeah.
because I was digging earlier today. I
Mm.
and I guess to kind of give you like a clue into my methodology is I say about maybe 30%, 25 to 30% of the things that I research are sometimes it'll be at like a whim's notice. I'll have a random
Right.
thought. You see what I'm saying? And from there, um, you'll be surprised where your intuition can really take you. Because
Right. Mm.
I was looking at uh, some of the statues within Washington D.C. I
Mm.
noticed that one of the statues that were relevant was a a Romanesque Grecian style statue,
Mm.
a goddess holding I'm gonna call it a gourd,
Mm.
and so realizing how all of this is really connecting in a weird, crazy way is the fact that whenever you do look at who this statue is representing, this is going to be Hestia, the
Mm.
goddess Hestia. And Hestia is actually very important whenever we are speaking about the Titans, right? And
Break that
that's,
down.
of course, of course, of course. So, when we are digging into Greek mythology, you are running into the conflict between the old primordial deities referring to the Titans, Cronus being one of their chiefs, one of their leaders. And basically, what you have here is you have the Titans, you have Cronus, right? Now, it came to a time where the Olympians were birthed from the Titans. Now, whenever the Olympians um, began to grow in power, grow in strength, the Titan Kronos received a vision, basically foreseeing one of his children, basically usurping his position. So what ends up happening is Cronus ends up devouring each of his children. Now, and it's crazy how they as much as they do teach on Greek history, Greek mythology, within the public school system, they never mentioned that Hestia was the first one to be eaten. She was the first one to be consumed by Cronus. So whenever Zeus Zeus ends up fighting Cronus, he's then able to free all of his brothers and sisters, being the main deities underneath that Grecian pantheon. And Hestia was actually the last one out, the last one to come out of the sorry, the first one to come out of the mouth, the first one to go in and the first one to come out. Now,
Hestia, before you go further,
mm-hmm,
Hestia, is
yes.
is that same as Hecate, or is that another goddess?
Ooh,
Because
see now.
Hecate is also Isis, and that she's also Hathor. So like, is that, or is she another goddess? Like, for for the goddess you're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
what are her attributes? Because I know like each
Okay,
goddess has their own attributes. Let's
of
see if it's the
course,
same thing. Mm-hmm.
of course, and damn, I mean, dang, in sorry. Now, whenever it does, I'm glad you brought up Hecate. um
Mm-hmm.
Hikat Hik
Mm-hmm.
um because she's actually known as the first sorceress as
Okay,
well.
right,
So she's gonna be that's gonna be another primordial mother goddess energy. Now
right.
Hestia, she's gonna be relevant, right? In
Okay.
in a very, very interesting way. With my research further into Hestia, I was able to, really see, a lot of the depictions of this goddess. She, after the war between the Olympians and the Titans,
Mm-hmm.
Hestia was, of course, the eldest, not just the
Mm-hmm.
eldest. By the time the Titans were done and gone, her role essentially was it wasn't spoken of much throughout the histories. However, from what we can find, it's showing that Hestia, after the war with the Titans, took on a role of an advisor, if you will, being um, a goddess who wasn't so bothered by the two human dramas of the rest of the Olympians. So it kind of she already has an air of being above notch from the rest. And when you do look at what she's representing the hearth. You feel what I'm saying? And this is very key whenever you are looking back into Greek home life, right? The hearth was of the most importance, right? Because that hearth never went out. And not just the private hearth of your home, but even the hearth. And when I say hearth, I mean fire. You feel me? That sacred fire. And there was even a sacred hearth for the public forum, right? See, now what's key about this is these never went out. These hearths never went out, and whenever they did, it was for a good reason, perhaps the passing of a kinsman. You see what I'm saying? And if it was put out, it was put out specifically for in a special way, and and not just that, Hestia herself would also um receive upon eating a meal. You pray to Hestia. You're not praying to Zeus. You're praying to Hestia. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this is,
Okay.
call continue.
Now I
Mm-hmm.
was gonna ask, so when you're talking about that, like Hestia, and then of course I just brought up Hecate or Hec or Hathor, and then we're bringing it back to Zeus and Titan, and then this planet called Titan, right? Or this moon called Titan. It has water, and then this moon called Titan is connected to Saturn. Now you brought up Kronos and Saturn, definitely a correlation there between Kronos and Saturn and the worship of Saturn and Saturnalia and things like that. Did you want to hop into that? Like, why is that so significant that you went into the Greek mythology relating to this particular planet called Titan?
Mm. Mm-mm-mm. See, that's fire because Cronus, chronomonoton. That's chronomonoton. The root of that word is going to be Cronus, and that's literally a measurement of time. Saturn is known as the father of time. You see what I'm saying? Um, Oof. And then when you're digging even deeper, right? When you're going into the Persiaistic religions, you have what you will call Aeon, Aeon, and that's going to be the primordial um deity who is going to be ruling like divine time, like time itself, or not even time as we know it, but just
Mm.
the measurement of such, and in the zodiac as well. And I
You
said
know what?
Persia. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting that you said the ion. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like it brought me back to the cartoon, one of my favorite cartoons, Ion Flux or
Yes.
Flux.
Spelt the same
Ah,
way. Spelt the exact same
wow.
way.
Wow. Okay, okay. I'm telling you, what one day we're gonna have to really dive deeper into that series because it's very deep, the messages they were trying to convey. But go ahead, continue.
Hmm. Of course, of course. And see, and we're talking about boom, Aeon, father of time, the father of the zodiac, and also what's key is when you do look at what he's being represented as, is essentially the Ouroboros. You feel what I'm saying? The Ouroboros, being that snake consuming its tail to really signify that cyclical nature of all things, right? And it's interesting because Miss I said Persia, but when you look at the Ouroboros specifically, this is going to be western to north western region of what we now know as Europe. So of course they're in tying everything together as all things do. Um because when you do look at this representation of Cronus, and you are looking at the fact that this is the largest moon of Saturn, and when you do look at Saturn and how um where's Saturn amongst the zodiac placements, right? Capricorn. Capricorn's ruled by Saturn. And where do you see Capricorn far as the zodiac table? You're seeing that going to be lying between December 21st, right? And January 19th. So essentially, that's encompassing the winter equinox. That's encompassing that period of I can't even really call it death, right? It's a little bit more significant than the shallow definition that we often known death to be now, right? Because when you do look at the root of it, we all go to sleep. That's that's a form of being dormant, but in that dormancy, that's a form of healing. So I suppose even with the barren, the the barren nature of a winter, you still see the most work even being done below the surface. You have that soil revitalizing itself, really recharging. Um, and all of this really just to say that when you do look at these ages, right? They're saying we're about to go into the age of Aquarius, right? Mm. So whenever it does come into plotting and charting, uh, these ages, right? Um, we're moving into the age of Aquarius out of the age of Pisces. Now, the way the ages work is it works counterclockwise, so it's not going to go in the order that you would usually put the zodiacs in. It's going to go counterclockwise. So, you know, as we all know, the age of Aquarius, what we've been seeing, we've been in a lot of these transitional energies. Transitional years comes in threes, which is very key because you don't have nine without three. So now what you're seeing here is we're moving into the age of Aquarius. Now, after the age of Aquarius, it's going to be the age of Capricorn, right? Now, this is all very interesting because when you do look at how these ages are corresponding with even how physical characteristics and sites like for example the pyramids of Giza. The pyramids of Giza are actually centered in what used to be like the center of the Earth's landmass, right? However, that shifts every precession of the equinox, which is going into the sector of study for as those ages, like we're talking about, and so it's all interesting because if we're finding that life is possible on Titan, a planet that's being named after the former guard, the old guard, if you will, you see what I'm saying, and we're knowing what representation Saturn's having far as the reality, that the ideals and principles that be have shaped things to be, right? We're talking about the god of time. We're talking about something old, something older than the Greek gods that they've put in our books, right? We're talking about um we're right in the middle of the fourth technological industrial revolution. It's a technological revolution. You know what I mean? What we have here is we now have space taxis, quite possibly being able to take people to the moon. Um, I'm sure Mars would be next. So what we're also having here is we're having a transition, and we've already seen the beginning of singularity, as far as the assimilation of technology into our everyday lives, and the fact that this is all happening all around at the same time is no coincidence.
So, with that being said, before we go further into that, because I want to take it back again to Saturn and drill in why that's so important in case and just the significance of that. And let me ask the question though before we continue. Have they ever traveled to Saturn? I don't think they've ever traveled, have they? I don't think so.
They what they have been able to do is they have sent out an unmanned um space traversing craft, kind of
Uh-huh.
like a drone essentially, and they were able to capture some of the terrain, and you
Mm.
know yeah, you see what I'm saying. It looks very similar to Mars, the composition of the soil, the geography, the sedimentary rock, and then what you're also seeing here is it looks identical to some of the escapes on Earth, far as specifically, you look at some of the desert regions within Afghanistan. It looks very similar to Afghanistan. And if you've never been to Afghanistan, you go to the Mojave Desert in California. It looks I've heard it looks basically the same. So just to give you an
Okay,
idea.
okay. Because I want to now
Mhm.
understand is how do they actually know that there's actual water that's actually on the moon of Saturn?
Okay. So basically, what they're doing here is, and definitely want to get this right. Let's see here. So I believe they're making a lot of these they come into a lot of these conclusions with studying the atmosphere. And I believe even let's see here. No, because that's a good question. Jamie, can you pull that up?
Yeah. So I'm asking that question because I mean, I always take I take a little bit of history and then I also take a little common sense, a little bit of logical sense approach to things, and I say, well, how do they actually know that? You know what I'm saying? So we got into, like you said, the Greek mythology. Okay, it derives from the Titan, and they called Titans as an older god governed by the universe before the Olympians did. Okay, Titan's mass is composed mainly of water in the form of ice and a rocky material. Ice and a rocky material. And I'm like, interesting. So I'm gonna assume that they sent some type of craft out there to investigate what was the surface like of Titan. It says Titan has no magnetic field. Um, it says like it has a slightly higher than Earth's pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Um, okay. It also says that, let's see here. It says that did I just read something about it's bigger than Mercury, the planet Mercury? Yeah, it says Titan is bigger than Mercury. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it says that the atmosphere is primarily composed of nitrogen, just like Earth's. but it has a surface pressure that is 50% higher. Titan has liquid hydrocarbons like methane and ethane in its river, lakes, seas, clouds, rains, and atmosphere. So I'm gonna assume, like, what did they do? Did they get a spaceship out there? They landed out there. Like, what did they do to get out there? And you know, how do they know so much? You know what I'm saying? Because I know some people, the people out there who would say that space is fake. Like everything that
Hmm.
they do and they say it's not real, it's fake, and they just making up a bunch of things
Sounds
just to
like
kind of go
Dr.
with their
Valentine.
narrative. So like based upon your research, what do you think is how they're able to kind of know these things about Titan and other moons out there?
Okay, so what I'm seeing, from a lot of my cross referencing, they are using something um
Hmm.
akin to radar mapping. So,
Okay.
yeah, they're getting the topography, the geography, and then they're making determinations then, from those studies. And then not just that, but let's see here, it's even the observation from a distance of certain things like ice, the certain
Mm,
composition of the clouds, basically signs of a water cycle, being present. So they're doing that, and then it's also going into the fact that okay, okay, so they're also saying that there are signs of radioactivity, and it's giving off heat signatures from within inside the moon, and which is basically pointing to signs of there being subsurface like lakes of water, essentially.
okay, okay, okay. All right. Well, like I said, that's very interesting to hear that. I know they're always trying to find new life, and I think it's ironic that the one of the main planets they like to worship is like they finally say that they found life on this planet, or potential that could be life on this planet because it's of some sort. And like I said, going back to the fact that we talked about all the time, Chronos connected to Saturnalia, the worship of Saturn. Even at the time in ancient times, it was believed that Saturn was actually the first sun. That is what some people have theorized. It's the black sun, it's the black planet. The bottom of Saturn has a cube. The black cube is what they actually worship. And you'll see them worshiping this at Mecca and a lot of places around the world where you see this black cube that people go to do some type of worship or praising at these cubes. And for those that are not in the know, would be really confused that why is there a bunch of people, or why is this random black cube in the middle of my city? And a lot of times it's because it probably does tie into this understanding from the occult understanding, esoteric understandings of what Saturn is to this planet. Um, and then going back to the fact you said with time and how you said that they're able to make time. Because as most of us should know, as we should know, is that time is really relative, and you can make time fit your narrative, right? Just like when they came over to the Americas, one of the first things that they did was that, especially when they came to North America, so I would say about mid 1600s, they had changed the calendars. So they came here underneath the Julian calendar, then they switched to the Gregorian calendar. So like time literally shifted in that moment. And one of the things I will always ask people about the indigenous people over here, though, because we calculated our time by 13 screws on the back of a turtle. So we had 13 cycles and we had 13 different harvests that we did for each cycle, which you can now translate that into 13 months, right? But now when we look at these other civilizations and how they brought their understandings here, now they are saying that we operate off 12-month cycles, right? We have 12 months. And it's just ironic that right at the beginning of a new year, we're at the middle of Saturnalia. We're literally at that brink of worship. of Saturn, of winter, of this winter solstice that they consider their new year. But we know as indigenous peoples, our new year definitely starts sometime when we what we now call spring, right? It would definitely not be in the dead of a winter where people are literally hibernating. Animals are hibernating, plants are hibernating for their rebirth within the next coming spring season. So we could definitely agree also that how we operate in this particular time frame or dimension, it's kind of out of whack to what we used to operate in I'll say in ancient times. Okay. Um, so let's go back to we talked about the Greek goddesses, and you said that you saw that on top of a building in DC, that you saw this Greek goddess up there. And I tell people all the time, even look at your state flags. Especially
Mm-hmm.
if you're along this the eastern seaboard, if you are part of the 13 colonies, you should definitely look at your state flags and see what deity is in your flag, because a lot of times those different images of people, they represent a different deity. So I don't know if you want to hop in there.
Of course, of
Go
course.
ahead.
No, for sure. Couple points here. Definitely a couple points. These bills are always I look, I dare say magnificent, because we're touching a lot, and at the end of the sentence, we're all seeing how it's correlating, definitely bridging that gap. So definitely much kudos. Now, what's interesting, right? Now I'm gonna speak on Hestia, but of course, I like to bring the source up, like Jamie, and you feel me, and really go in, because when you do even look at the significance of you know Titan, uh you're talking about I mean, sorry, not Titan, but Saturn. You see what I'm saying? You have a lot of, what I'm finding for as my referencing at this moment, a lot of what we just spoke on. And if you will, not to be long my winded, but just to give a little context, it says here, um, Saturn is a slow moving planet, sometimes called Kronos. Mm, boom. And then it says Falsifer and Shani by the Hindus. It's crazy because Falsifer sounds very, very similar to Lightbringer, if you see what I'm saying. And he says,
Hmm.
he is called the eldest of the gods, and in Greek mythology, he is told to devour his own children, which symbolizes that time, aka Kronos, destroys the material creation. And it's funny because when you look at the personification of time in the zodiac within the god of Aeon, Aeon is also represented by the Ouroboros. And then when you look at Saturn, he's eating his children. You see what I'm saying? It's interesting.
Right.
You see, and then
Right.
it continues to say that this article I'm reading is making connection between the Abrahamic gods and Saturn. Interesting. And then it says here that in Islam, Kaaba, the black cube is venerated. Saturn's color is black. Its number is 8, which is the total of the corners of the cube. Jewish males sometimes wear the
Mm.
black cube on their foreheads. Um, and the cube represents confinement and no way out in the esoteric symbology. And just to touch on that, on some, because um, you know, going over things, studying things, and then coming together with other people who were, interested in, the interesting aspects of all things. It really starts to, put things to in context, because like we're saying, Saturn's being represented by time. And so with that being said, um Aeon is the god of time, although these are two different um geographical theologies and thought processes, far as Saturn and Aeon, Chronos and Aeon. But you still see that the significance of those cycles. The Ouroboros eating its tail, Chronos eating his children. Um, Literally putting the Olympians in a position to where symbolically they're letting you know they they interrupted a cycle. And it's interesting because now we
Mm.
can definitely go into Hestia, right? You have Hestia, and in many of her epithets, whenever you are looking at the Greek pantheons of gods, many times, most times, the gods are going to have not one, not two, usually about three or four,
Mm-hmm.
different signifiers to let you know that, hey, this is this deity. You see what I'm saying? And Hestia, she's often portrayed to have modest clothing on, literally.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Almost looks like an Amish lady. And all respect to the Amish, of course. But what you're also seeing is the representation of her holding a gourd, holding a vase, holding, a what do you can almost call it Piscean, if you will, which is quite interesting, correlating, that conversation for as us just leaving the Piscean age. And but basically to
Mm.
you
Mm.
see what I'm saying. Sorry,
I'm
Libra
actually,
is
I'm
the water
actually,
bearer. Mm-hmm.
okay, yeah, Libra is the water bird. I'm actually looking at a picture, a statue of Hestia. There's
Mm-hmm.
another statue of her with her pointer finger pointed up,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like curved a little bit. And I literally saw there's a painting that Da Vinci did. I have to find that painting, but it's a painting that Da Vinci did where the he didn't use women models. A lot of his models
Mm-hmm.
were his little boy apprentices, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so his boy apprentice that's actually painted like a woman. He's doing the same exact uh, position with the finger pointed up, but it's curved. The finger's curved a little bit. So that just goes to show you how much a lot of the modern day and even art of the past was very much influenced by these Greek goddesses as well. And we know that Da Vinci is
Mm-hmm.
also credited for making the Last Supper painting, which is actually one of the
Mm-hmm.
paintings that is used by Christians even today to depict that supper with the 12 disciples. And it's kind of ironic out, and I put this actually on the website, one of my write-ups I did, where I was asking a question, why do a lot of the men that founded the Americas, how come a lot of them have fake portraits?
Mm.
And it was just kind of interesting that that Last Supper painting was painted right around the time of the age of exploration. So right around the time that they were creating this Christianity thing, and we're going to get into the next topic, the next religion that you actually wrote about. We're going to get into that one because it was kind of funny that right around the time of this age of exploration, we got into you see these paintings popping up, and these are going to be the core paintings and the core images that's going to be used to shape your mind to think and believe this is what your disciples or this is what your savior will look like. You know what I'm saying? So even with the Jesus image, it's we a lot of the images that you see, it is coming from out of Da Vinci's paintings. A lot of the way that we shape our reality is coming out of a lot of Da Vinci's artwork, which is interesting. You're dealing with the Da Vinci Code. But let's go into the next topic though. You were talking about Zoroastrians. And I thought this was a really interesting topic because a lot of people have never heard about Iran. And how does Iran even relate to modern day America today? Like, how does these two? I mean, the only time we really hear about Iran and countries of that part of the world is when we're dealing with the weapons of mass destruction and things like that. We went to war, yada 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 yada. But a lot of people don't understand that some of the understand is that we have today actually is coming from other parts of the world, or is replicated around the world. So yeah, so tap into the Zoroastrianism, and what is that, and how does it actually mold and shape Christianity today?
For sure, for sure. Whew, where do I start? I can definitely say for sure, whenever you are looking at Zoroastrianism, essentially what you're looking at, you're looking at a thought form, you know, a a guideline of beliefs that's going to be predating, the Abrahamic, religions. It's going to be, like we have spoken before, it's going to be set during Iran. Is where you're going to see the conception of Zoroastrians, and actually, let me correct myself, Persia, the Achaemenid Empire, the Parthian Empire. So this is going to be compromising many parts of um, Iran, also Afghanistan, um, the northern regions of India, certain parts of Pakistan. When you do look at the birth of the Persian Empire, it's quite large, specifically the Achaemenid, right? And to give reference, the Achaemenid Empire is the same empire which Xerxes was the ruler of, referencing to the movie 300 and that line of history. Far as the Greco-Persian Wars, we're talking about, to give you an idea, or those who are listening, we're talking about this demographic of peoples. And when you do look at Zoroastrianism, what you have is you have a belief that you have what you call a Mazda, Ahura Mazda. Ahura Mazda is going to be the supreme god of good, of light. Now, what's interesting for Zoroastrianism compared to the three later monotheistic religions is the fact that instead of the source of both good and bad coming from, you know, the Abrahamic idea of God, what you have is in Zoroastrianism, you have Ahura Mazda and his counterpart. So there's a constant battle going on between the forces of light and darkness. Now, when you are looking at the root of Zoroastrianism, what you're seeing is you have someone called Zarathustra, and Zarathustra is gonna be the prophet of Zoroastrianism. And it's interesting because you see him traveling from one part of Afghanistan to, I believe, one of the northern regions of Afghanistan, formerly the lands of the Bactrians. And the Bactrians are going to be a portion of the Greek, of the the Hellenic soldiers who came with Alexander the Great. Is going to be the remnants, basically, of Greek foreigners within what we now know as, I suppose, at the time, Greater Persia. Now, what happens is Zarathustra, he combines the many pantheons of the um of the proto-Persian, proto-Zoroastrian thought processes, and to emphasize, this was more so of a polytheistic belief system, similar to the Vedas within ancient Bharat, Hindustani, beliefs and systems. And not just that, actually, the gods of Zoroastrianism actually became the demons within the Hindu religion, to give you an idea of how old this thought process is going back to, right? Now, going back to the importance of Zarathustra, he essentially he began a movement where Ahura Mazda, like we said before, is the chief deity within Zoroastrianism. Now, before Zarathustra, Ahura Mazda was among many of the pantheons of Old Persia, Old Iran. We're talking about Indo-Iranians. We're talking about before the split of the Indo Aryans um in the in the Aryan Hindus. So, just to emphasize the antiquity of it all, right? Now, Zarathustra makes Ahura Mazda the supreme deity. Now, along with making him the supreme deity, a couple other things occur. For example, just like how you see with during the age of colonization, you see Catholicism being brought by the Spanish Empire, and in specific places within the Americas. Many of the indigenous belief systems would be incorporated within the idea of saints within Catholicism. And so what you're seeing is you're seeing a carrying on of the indigenous belief systems, but mixed and assimilated into the local form of Catholicism. Now, you can kind of think of the process of Zarathustra's putting Ahura Mazda on the pedestal, and then at the same time also incorporating the rest of the pantheon into minor roles. For example, the role of being, the angels of, the servants of Ahura Mazda. Um, it's all a very interesting history. I can definitely go in more in depth because when you are looking at Zoroastrians, um, this is where you're getting the concept of the ziggurats. You see what I'm saying? This is they too actually had a sacred worship of fire, um, the sacred fire, and that's going to be one of the main principles of Zoroastrians as well. And it's heavy. It's heavy because when you do look at bringing it back to Zoroastrianism and its connection to history as a greater whole, this is going to be um the thought processes and the thought forms of old Persia, proto Iran before it was Iran. So what you have is during the budding of Christianity, within Judea and beyond, into the um the Parthian Empire, that being the lands of the Persian Empire. Of course, speaking on during the times of the Roman occupation of the Holy Land of Judea, um what you have is Christianity. For example, Armenia. Armenia was one of the first kingdoms to adopt Christianity as its um you know main religion, right? Now it's funny because we hear about Armenia today. What I think the Kardashians are from Armenia. Um, Armenia is mentioned many times within the Bible. Um,
Mhm.
Armenia comes up in history often. Actually, you fast forward during the times of the Crusades, the Armenians sent soldiers to fight with the Christians against Saladin and the Islamic warlords during the times of the Crusades. The Teutonic Knights had castles within Armenia. Now, going back to Armenia during this time of Roman occupation of Judea, what happens is you have the ruler of Armenia is Mithridates the first, right? Now, what Mithridates does is he establishes Christianity as Armenia's national religion, and to give you a date, let me see here. Let's see, Armenia converts to Christianity. Let's see. Okay. So you're gonna have. Okay, fantastic. And thank you for your patience. All right. I say about the 4th century AD. All right, yeah, that makes sense. So around the 4th century AD, um, Armenia converts to Christianity. Now, the man who's in rulership of Armenia, his name is Tiridates or Mithridates, depending on which language you're speaking, right? Now, what's interesting about all of this is the fact that he establishes Christianity as the main religion of Armenia. However, he and the rest of the higher class are what what many now know as magi, right? Interesting, right? Thinking about the story of Jesus in the manger, right? Now, the reason why Mithridates and the rest of the higher class are considered magi is because there's Zoroastrians. These are gonna be ethnically Iranian. You see what I'm saying? Um, how you may consider them classified later in history is Parsi. And basically, what a Parsi person is an Iranian migrant who is a Zoroastrian. So, what you have is Armenia establishing Christianity as its national religion. However, Mithridates and the rest of his court in high society remain magi. They remain Zoroastrians. You see what I'm saying? And that's key. You see what I'm saying? Because at this point in time, you're seeing the upper class go on by a form and process that's predating Christianity. That's you have the symbology of the cross being present within certain sects within Zoroastrians. The idea of one supreme God, at that even. And even all going back to Magi. Why are these Zoroastrian kings of the Christian kingdom called Magi? You see what I'm saying? And then that's where we start to look and dig into bloodlines. You're digging into a line of priests, a line of kings. Um, and funny how that is all correlating within the story of Christianity for as what the 3 Magi. And what do they use? They use the stars to find Jesus of Nazareth within the manger. All proclaiming to the fact that the Magi were the first scientists in that area of the world, speaking loosely, of course. And then realizing that even during the time of, the birthing of Jesus of Nazareth, for as history has been given, right? What you have is the Roman occupation of Judea. Now, at the time, Parthia, Parthia could also be known as, New Persia, right? Rome and Parthia there had been conflicts before, there had been wars before. By this time, 4th century AD, it's you know it's cordial. So even when you are looking at a lot of these analysis with the presence of the Magi in the story of Christianity, you're seeing these analysis being put forth that saying within the historical context, hypothetically or what have you, for these magi's from old Persia, new Persia, now Parthia, to come into Roman occupied land, right? And when we are talking about magi, just like we mentioned, the magi are of high society. They're government officials, if you will, at this point, to really give you an idea. So the 3 magi come into Judea, Roman occupied land of a different kingdom. However, as we all know, King Herod pointed his, he abided, he fancied the request. And, by the analysis, the way they're putting it, it was to keep the peace. Rome didn't want a war with Parthia. And and then realizing that these magi weren't just these um, three dudes with turbans. You feel what I'm saying? Like, no, they're like contextually, the history is telling a different story that's not often spoken about. You see what I'm saying? Because when you are looking at Zoroastrians, you see what I'm saying? What I'm seeing is you're having a case of cryptos before what we now know as the expulsion of 1491, right? Where you have the expulsees from Sephardim and wider converting to new religions under, but while still being true to what they know, right? This is the exact same thing that's happening with Zoroastrians during the migrations of these Iranian migrants who are practicing Zoroastrianism. And like I said before, those are called Parsis. Now, what you have, fast forwarding to what mm, well, like this 1600s, what you have is you have Shivraji Mirage, right? Mirage, also known as Manaj. He's gonna be a um a Hindu king who basically um he gets the Muslim occupation out of many parts of India um up out of there. He's Hindu, so he's spreading Hindu, but while at the same time, when you look into his history, he's coming from the Decca um region, the region of Decca, and the region of Decca is going to be close to what we now know as Gujarat. Now, Gujarat is going to be um, west coast of India, very close to Pakistan, if I'm not mistaken. In that region of Gujarat, um, and among the lands east called the Decca region, that's going to be a region during the 1600s and prior where you're going to have a high frequency of Iranian Parsis migrating into India, right? Now, Shivaji Maharaj, he himself was actually also of Parsi origin, and it's said that he himself was also Zoroastrianism. But it's funny because Hinduism is the law of the land, while just like in Armenia, the upper class are what magi. Now, fast forwarding what to the 17, 1800s, 1600s, what you have is you have the British occupation of India. And with that being said, you know, we all know how colonization goes. The wealthy have always held a seat within, the halls and courts of the occupiers of the land, right? Now, what you have is you have a man from the Wadi family. His name is Arasir Wadi, and he's coming from a Parsi family, a Iranian immigrant, Zoroastrian worshiping family, migrating down into India to the Gujarat district. And the Gujarat district region is, like I said, also going to be where a lot of these higher upper class, a lot of the Mirages, aka Menages, are going to be coming from the Gujarat region. Now, Ardashir, specifically, coming from a wealthy family, he actually joins the Royal Society, the oldest Royal Society in existence, the same one that Sir Isaac Newton joined upon his scientific discoveries. Right, just to give you an idea of how close these Parsis are to high society, as far as the Western world is concerned. And what's also interesting about Ardashir Wadi is the fact that he's coming from a shipbuilding family, and many of the ships within the West, the Dutch East Indies Company, are actually going to be coming from this Iranian Parsi family
Okay.
of shipbuilders.
Before you
So,
before
mhm.
you go any further, I want to tie that into what people may not have already connected the dots. Before we get into the East India Company and how that ties right back into America. Um, so the Mirages, um, we have some famous Mirages here in America. One of
Europe.
the Yeah, so one of the famous Minajes that we do have is who we now call Nicki Minaj, right? She comes from the Mirage family. A lot of the Mirages, and there's different variations of spelling the same last name. They're all the same family. It's just that once they split and they went different ways, they just have different ways of just spelling the same last name. But you have some Mirages that did go to Jamaica. You have Mirages that went to Trinidad and a
Hmm.
few other islands out there. So just to kind of connect it, so people can understand why is that so important? Because sometimes we have to break that down for people why that's so important when you start calling out certain names and how it relates to people that we know today. Because a lot of people would have caught on to that. But continue, go ahead. So we're going to go into the Dutch East India Company. All right, continue. Now, how does that play into Christianity, mirages, coming to America? How does all that come together with Iran and et cetera, et cetera?
Okay, for sure, for sure. So, basically, whew, connecting that Zoroastrianism and connecting the fact that what you have is you're having interactions between the Christian world and the Eastern thought process and faith, and of Zoroastrianism coming from the East, like um you know it's interesting because we're talking about Armenia, 4th century AD. You see what I'm saying? And that's so some the way I'm seeing things is symbological, because you see what's going on in that case. You feel what I'm saying? Formerly Zoroastrian state is now Christian. You see what I'm saying? Now, what you also have is you have cults coming out of Zoroastrianism. You have, just like you have the cult of the Essenes, you have the cult of Cybele. What you have is the cult of Mithras, right? Now, Mithras is going to be coming from um, Zoroastrianism. You see what I'm saying? And it spread into Europe during the Roman occupation of Judea and much of the Arab world at the time, right? So what you have here is you have all of these Roman soldiers converting to this Mithraic cult, which is stemming from Zoroastrianism. And then what you have is, fast forwarding to modern day, modern times, you're finding temples to Mithras like being uncovered in London. You feel me? Not just in London, but many other places. You see what I'm saying? And the it's quite clear that many of the details of this code of Mithras are secret or concealed. Um, However, much is a lot of it is telling whenever you are looking at many of the examples that we have today. For example, whenever you are looking at the depiction of Mithras, what you're seeing is you're seeing someone with a Phrygian cap. And a Phrygian cap is going to be a type of headwear that's going to be common within Iran, that region of the world, right? And he's depicted slaying a bull. And however, in these depictions, what you also have is Mother Earth present, and sitting below her are the four seasons. And then above Mithras slaying the bull, you have the representation of the sun god and the moon god. And um and then within the cloak of Mithras, you have certain stars and constellations. So, you know, even within, the examples of the code of Mithras, although very, very sparse, you have an idea of some of the key emphasis and principles within the code of Mithras, pointing to going back to the stars again, the moon, the sun, these cycles. You see what I'm saying? And you know, and that's just showing how Zoroastrianism in the code of Mithras, coming from Zoroastrianism, has seeped its way into the Christian world, um, the way we see things, even far as the idea of angels. And Zoroastrians had the idea of angels and demons. According to Zoroastrianism, there's actually a constant battle going on at all times between the forces of good and evil. Sounds a lot like what many evangelicals teach for as the doctrine of Christianity, and even specifically for as the battle between the jinn and Islam. So you're even seeing those principles being reflected, right? Within the code of Mithras, bread and wine were actually key to many of the ritualistic stylings of the code of Mithras. And not just that, the bread would actually symbolically, all of the rolls of bread would have a cross, like a crucifix, more so, not even a cross, a crucifix embedded into them as well. Um, you know, which is even showing some signs of correlation there. It's it's all very interesting, of course. And it definitely all ties together because even when you do look into the scriptures, right? They tell you that
Mm-hmm.
You know, Abraham fled from Ur with the arts of the Chaldeans. You see what I'm saying?
Mm.
The Chaldeans are going to be what you would consider, you feel me, that region of Persia, parts of Babylon. And when you look into the scripture, I'm not religious, but I read a lot. You see that, um,
Right.
whenever Adam and Eve's children are conceived, there are other peoples on earth at the time. And the way it's described is, when they are describing the Chaldeans or the peoples of that region, they're calling them the Anakim. And the Anakim are going to be connecting to the fallen angels. So basically, the people of that region are going to be referred to as the descendants of those of the fallen angels. You see what I'm saying? And I'm saying all
Mm-hmm.
of that to say, right, it's interesting because when you look at, like we said, Abraham fled Ur with the arts of the Chaldeans. He was well versed within, you know, that area of the world sciences, and that is directly correlating with Zoroastrianism, those Sumerian gods. When you look at the fact that when you even look into Kabbalah, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kabbalah is known to be, is basically that's the secret of name. That's one of the translations, right? That's a secret of name. You feel what I'm saying? Um, and when you understand that, when you see that many of these forbidden knowledges that were passed from human beings, from the watchers, from the fallen angels, um, all of these arts are going to be falling underneath the secret of name, the Kabbalah, right?
Mm.
So that's to emphasize the fact that also Abraham didn't come from a lowly family when he fled Ur. You see what I'm saying? He himself was a magi. You see what I'm saying? And then not just that, Zoroastrianism even speaks of Muhammad in its text of coming, of a coming prophet for, um the way basically put it for, the son of Islam is, not exact, but essentially, you see what I'm saying? So, you see connections from the royal families of these different nations, establishing Christianity, but still being Zoroastrians. And then you're seeing, um, the correlations between the thought forms, the similar beliefs. Um, the signs are definitely there. Hopefully I kind of frame that to where it's understandable. Who, because I kind of get lost, honestly. You see what I'm saying? Like, because we
No,
done
because
jumped.
and it's yeah, no, you jump like so many different centuries just to come back and tie it back in, tie it back in. But that's how it is when you're trying to connect the dots, because you start realizing like it's all connected. Like how you just brought up the mirages, and how the mirages, a lot of them were they were Hindu priests, and they were being put into indentured servitude into the colonies, the British colonies here in the Americas, and how that plays a role into this their history, and how they're placed into the and the Christianity, and how Hinduism and Kabbalah is like God, it's like it's all like this one big
Hmm.
jumbled thing, but it has origin points, it has meeting points, and I think that's why when we're trying to explain it the best way we can, I'm telling you right now, you can explain it the most simplest way you can. For those who know, they'll get it. For those who don't, they're going to have a harder time to get it regardless. You know what I'm saying? Because it's still going to go over some people's heads. Like, how did you tie in Nicki Minaj to some freaking Christianity? What that have to do? Like that's going
Hmm.
to literally go over people's heads. But
Dance
it was,
Hall, Super
yeah,
Cat. He's a Minaj too. He's a Mirage too. That's crazy.
right. And see, Super Cat is from Jamaica, right? And
Hmm.
um a lot of some of your early dancehall artists, they were coming from that Indian Hindu background. If you actually paid attention, I think here in America, we only really heard their voices. So like if we heard a popular song, we just hear a voice, but we never really put sometimes a face to that voice. So when I saw some of the pictures of some of the early, like really popular 90s dancehall artists, and I was like, oh wow, you do look Hindu. You do look Indian. Oh wow. But you
Hmm.
sound you sound like this. Like I didn't imagine that, but you are an Indian. You come from India. I mean, that's what they ended up calling that place, right? So, but it's very important that we talk about this, because the whole point of bringing out these different names that are tied to these lineages is because we're talking about, once again, lineages. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about the importance, and how these are real people. Like, these people don't die off, and that's something that people who don't study history, they'll just like chuck it up to, oh, you're just reading about something, but you don't realize that what you're reading about, there are actual living descendants of these bloodlines. And hell, it could be you could be one of the living descendants from one of these stories. You know what I'm saying? At some point
Hmm.
it could connect, at some point. So I definitely appreciate how you broke that down all the way, because I don't think a lot of people have heard about Zoroastrianism. And it's like I said, to tie that into Iran, and to tie that into Hinduism, to tie that into where we are today, where we talk about the Dutch East India Company. And for those who don't know, the Dutch East India Company was also a part of the transatlantic slave trade, right? So that was a company, though, they were bringing a lot of, once again, Hindu indentured service to work. Now you had the Dutch East India Company, you had the what is some? You had the Royal African Company. What were some other companies that they had at that time?
The
It was
Royal Virginia
the
Company.
okay. What was
Hmm.
some other companies? The Royal Virginia Company, Dutch East India Company. Was there a West?
There was a West
Did
Indies
there
company
was
as
a
well.
West Indies Company? Okay, I know there was a West one. So all these different companies. they are literally the ones that's like in control of really moving around merchants. They're moving around merchandise, and they're moving around different labor, or as we would say, some were slaves, some were indentured servants, but they're moving around these different people to come to different parts of the world to provide a source of labor, a source of security, and even sometimes a military force. Because we oftentimes look at history like, okay, well, these people were coming because they were just coming to work. Okay, after a while, you don't need but so many damn people to work. You know what I'm saying? Like, you really gonna need people to protect your property. You're gonna need people to
Mm,
protect your brand. You're gonna need people to protect what you have so that it does not become invaded by even indigenous people. It does not become invaded by a foreigner that is coming over and now wants to take over your land because they just saw you take it over from somebody else, right? So they feel like it's free game at this point. So you also will find that there were people coming to the Americas or being shipped here, even if it was for their will, against their will, prisoners of war, and oftentimes they were trained to be a part of militias. They was trained to protect the properties here. They were trained to even conquer properties here as well. I would even have to jump aboard and say this. I believe that some people actually came on their free will because wherever they were, it was destitute. They didn't have a lot of opportunity. Maybe they didn't have a lot of food, and it was like it's
mm-hmm.
kind of like what people do today. It's like I ain't doing nothing, so I might as well join the military. You know what I'm saying? Like you ain't doing nothing else, so you might as well go join the military. You might as well try to make a career for yourself, and if you're successful, in this time period, if you're successful, we're going to give you some land. Um, we're going to give you some type of higher position once we do acquire this piece of land. You know, we're going to make sure that you're set up. You're if you were in some type of servitude, I'm going to make sure your contract is ended and you get some money in your pocket. You know, so you can start a new family. So like I said, there's so many ways to kind of look at this time period instead of one way. And when we're in school, we're looking at these time periods one way. And I think that's why when we bring in these new thought processes, it just kind of goes over people's heads. And it's like this, like they don't think it's that deep. Like it's like, oh, it's not that deep. No, it really is that deep because there's so many things happening at once when we're talking about, especially if we're dealing with what 1300s, 1400s, 15, 16, 1700s into the 1800s. There is so much going on at this period of time that it's not just slavery. Okay, it's a lot happening, and it's a lot being established at this
Mm-hmm.
time period too. So let's get into
Oh, by the way, Vel,
yeah, go ahead, go
and
ahead.
before we do get too far, I can't believe I didn't bring this up before, but the hit art before Iran was Islamic, it was Zoroastrian. So that's also another way to tie into everything. And boom. But
Oh,
yes,
really?
yes, yes.
Wow,
Mm-hmm.
wow. So you said before Iran, before they went into what are they doing right now? They're doing
Islam.
Islamics. Before they were
Mm-hmm.
Islamics, they were Zoroastrians.
Yes.
Ah,
Mm-hmm. And then
interesting.
the Muslims persecuted them, which is why you are having so many migrations into Armenia and so many migrations into India.
Mm-hmm.
And you see what I'm saying? And then, like we said, the Minaj, who's coming from those Persian, the region where many of the Iranian Persians or Austrians are migrating to in India, he defeats the um is the Muslims in that region of India. So
Mm.
even though you see him, but knowing that there are a lot of the aristocracy were Parsi, Magi's aristocracy, you see where we're going with this.
Mm. Oh, wow, wow, wow. See,
Hmm.
this is where we dab up the deep end.
But see, but hey, but you cooking too because there is so much going on here during this time.
Oh yeah.
Time. But yeah, please continue.
No, 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 no. Because you're getting into depth what's going on. Because like I said, we're taking everything for face value. So I'm giving you the floor to kind of go more in depth with it. I don't know if White Wolf, if you're still with us, I don't know if he wants to chime in. Um, because I know we went into the religion aspect, but we're gonna get into quickly. Let's talk about let's see. Because and just thinking about it for a sec, when talking about Christianity, I also want to understand how do we get the character Jesus then? So if you're looking at Zoroastrianism, where does Jesus fit into even that religion? Do they have a Jesus in their religion?
When you see
Hmm.
you see when you see a lot of depictions of Zarathustra, the prophet, right, of
Hmm.
Zoroastrians, the great prophet of Ahura Mazda, Mazda, literally Mazda, like the whip, like the car. So
Aha. Right, Mazda.
hmm that
Uh-huh.
that symbol is ancient, and that's another that's another thing I connected.
So let me read this real quick. It
hmm
says, uh, there is one God named Ahura Mazda. He is the
hmm
good and perfect creator who is all powerful and all knowing, all wise, perfect, and beneficent.
mm,
But
mm,
Ahura Mazda has an evil twin named Angra Manu. Am I saying that right?
hmm
Manu? Manu. It says Angra Mainyu is co-equal and co-eternal with God, and is the source of all evil and corruption. So it's almost like you're talking about like this Satan and this Jesus, this good and evil that's happening, this battle between the two. And it's kind of funny because he said that's his evil twin, like they're brothers. And isn't that some
Jacob and
similar?
Esau.
Yeah, yeah. It's always like
hmm
these twins or these brothers that are one is good and one is bad. And but then it's like the good and bad is our perspective, right? Because what you consider good, someone considers bad, and what someone considers bad, someone considers good. So it's all perspective
hmm
at that point. But it's interesting here. It says humanity must resist evil as they participate in its battle as well. Christians and Jews, on the other hand, believe that God is the source of both good and evil. Islam holds that it's fundamental to believe that everything good or bad originates from God, that only natural occurrences, such as sickness and natural disasters, or human choice to defy God's commands, may be considered evil or terrible. Wow. It says what is interesting is that Zoroastrians' understanding for their God being the ultimate supreme, since he is opposition to quarrel with his polarity, something you don't see within the every.